Although I appreciate the thought. Especially because it's kind of funny to imagine.
Alright, I don't think anyone's coming.
Alright, then I'm going to key and we start.
Oh, right when I said that, there's people coming.
Yeah.
This is the fashion location.
Yeah.
Exquisite. Has it not started?
It is
Yeah,
not.
not yet.
Is this all related to love then? Like every single event for today and weekend?
You can construe a way in which every event is related to love.
Yeah. The overall point of the conference is
Improving
organizers-
relationships.
no, the organizer's overall goal is to improve the data selection or improve dating apps via personality embeddings. And ideally to figure out what makes partners a better match for each other and make the dating market more efficient.
Hey, more people.
But also, this
More
attracts
person.
people who are generally interested in dating too.
Darn. If only there were free
I know.
sodas here.
Dude, this place never has like a real soda. They have San Pellegrino, but that's it.
What are you talking about?
It's
What's
all
a real
diet.
soda?
A Coca-Cola.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like an honest red can or bottle Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I guess
That's
I just-
the soda.
I never look for those because I'm always looking for diet soda.
Platonic ideal is a Coca-Cola.
Huh?
A platonic soda.
Definitely a Coke. It has no taste memory. Alright, as he might have yelled out, the talk downstairs was about the future, while this one's about the past and
Okay.
sort of the present, about dressing. Where I don't know if you saw the talk title, but the full title was Menswear, the aristocratic superiority of the mind. And the second part of that, the whole superiority of the mind bit, is from this essay by Charles Baudelaire called The Dandy, where he says that contrary to what a lot of thoughtless people think, dandyism is not an excessive delight in dressing or clothes. For the perfect dandy, these things are no more than symbols of the aristocratic superiority of his mind, which is stuck.
Just to make sure,
Yeah.
are you recording?
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
A big aspect of dressing is balancing two opposites, like standing out, fitting in, doing it for yourself, doing it for the world at large. And the middle path between these is some fuzzy fractal boundary, and actually finding it is really difficult. Which is why people who try to just like go on one side or the other tend to just look bad one way or another. In the end, though, it needs to come personally, just because society is built more bottom up than top down. And something like style working purely top down doesn't typically happen. That just results in people dressing as per some basic need, which results in a sort of total uniformity, which is not style. And also, since this is an opinionated talk, I'm leaning towards standing out over fitting in, especially since this is the love symposium and it's supposed to help you get some love. Plus, even the word aristocrat comes from the Greek word aristos, which just means best. And the R in it is a Proto-Indo-European root, which means fitted, like art, like a carpenter would fit a square. So what matters for menswear? In order: fit, color, proportion, and quality of material. Decreasing order of importance. And for each one, the other ones are pretty hard prerequisites. So regardless of your style, if things don't fit, it will not look that good. And this is actually more significant for men than for women. Like with women's wear, there's it can be baggy, it can be tight fitted, it can be something in between, and it can work in all cases, although not necessarily, but it can. For menswear, this is just not really the case. Even like seemingly baggy clothes tend to fit in a perverse sort of way where the core of the cloth does fit, and then there's like things that are sewn on that are essentially like flaps that give it the illusion of extra volume. Well, as for fitting clothes, sure, you get up. You're gonna be the model for a second.
Okay.
Hey. Just in time. I'll repeat the 4 for him. I was just saying that for menswear, more than for women's wear, these things matter in this order: fit, color, proportion, and quality of material. And I'm about to use him as a model for fit. Because he's next to me, really. That's the only reason.
Should he be on screen?
It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
probably, yes.
Okay, stand over there then. And for the moment, take off the cape. You can like put it behind your shoulders, but the way that clothes are constructed, which you can see even with a t-shirt, is that basically it starts with stitching around the shoulders and then it is put into panels. Here, this is in like 1 panel, 2 because of the stitch line, 3, 4, 1 for each arm. And in this case, that's about it because it's a t-shirt and it's relatively simple. Like this jacket would have, well, more certainly, but jackets especially are constructed starting with the shoulders, which is why after the shoulders don't fit, the only way to really fix that is to completely unstitch the garment, fix it, and then restitch it, which is why it's, the amount of labor is just like so intensive that I've only ever heard of tailors doing this when someone, usually an African dictator, has clothes made out of an animal that's extinct, so they can't just get more material. And then chest as well. Basically what dictates fit is how it matches natural markers in your body. In the case of shoulders, the natural marker is the bone, which the hell is that?
I do still want to be taking notes on this, so I'm just going to
Yeah,
do that
you can-
while I model.
Sure. Getting this for a second. I'm basically looking for like the bone where his shoulder joins. Because you see this line? This should more or less match up with that. Just following the theme of the break points of your clothes should match the natural break points of your body. Also, the clothes will just tend to feel better if they fit. For a really dramatic example of this, you can look up on YouTube the Nicholas Brothers Down Argentine Way, where these 2 brothers in full tailcoats are doing backflips and the splits and all sorts of stuff, which is not associated with suits usually, because people typically associate them with being, well, stiff and hard to move in. I mean, of course, like a t-shirt is easier to move in than a suit, but not as much as you might think if it's fitted well. Like another one is like armholes. In my case, actually, they're pretty high up. Like armholes that are relatively small and that fit your body more closely will let you move more, which should make sense if you think about the geometry of it for a second. And for chest, I just recommend like get measured. Those 2 measurements alone are actually enough to mostly dictate the fit of like the top part of your clothing. The bottom part is length, the inseam, and this. And for men especially, you don't want to go for something that's super skinny. This is actually too skinny for my taste. Like today is not exactly the outfit I would use as a model if I was really trying to show off, but it works well enough. Like his pants are slightly too long, which you can see because they come down to here near the bottom of his foot, and it's possible you've sort of trod on them slightly by accident before. In fact, you're right
Definitely
there.
happened.
Color, we'll get back to color. Proportion, okay, you can sit down. You're a model now. This is one way to view, I guess. Like, the size of this, for example, is a good example of proportion. Like if it was like this, the proportion is, well, kind of off because it's super exaggerated. Whereas if it's like this, well, that one that looks like a vestigial limb and is also exaggerated but in the opposite direction. And probably like something like this would be about right. And what dictates proportion is just, yeah, the relative scalings of parts of clothes in relation to each other. This is the kind of thing you do by eye. Again, most of this stuff is you start bottom up and then you develop a idea of it, and then top down sort of theory follows. Like another thing would have a proportion. Like these things are relatively large, but the proportions are basically fine, because also an important point about menswear is more than women's wear. Also, it's dictated by, well, practical needs. Like menswear basically descends from like military clothing of some kind, which is supposed to be functional in some way, including a suit. Even though suits are now like one of the ultimate non-functional pieces of clothing. Whereas women's wear has all sorts of random shit that doesn't do anything, especially the pockets, which I feel sad for them, because their pockets don't work half the time. Like this is actually, well, this part's decently well proportioned. This is not, it's too long.
This
In fact,
down part?
No, this part.
Oh,
in
yeah.
fact, you've rolled it up.
Yeah.
And even then, it's still too long. Like, there.
Okay.
See, and that's another natural break point. Feel
That
the
makes
bone
sense.
right there. Like for a jacket, you typically want that because it leaves your arm unobstructed, which should just intuitively make sense as to why that's desirable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why clothes makers make the pockets useless for women clothes? Like, what's the reason?
I don't know what the actual factual historical reason is. A reason I've heard is that then the lines of them are much more tightly fitted, mostly to show off their body. 'Cause skinny jeans are a good example. Like if you have skinny jeans and you take, here I'm gonna borrow your phone for a second.
Okay.
Like you take this phone and you jam it in something like this, you can see the line of the phone in this, and it looks very natural because sharp lines like this are just not typical for like the human body.
It's also I've heard.
Yeah.
It's also I've heard a trade-off between, well, women have bags, and men don't really have bags.
Which kind of hyperstitions itself into women have to have bags now.
Yeah.
Which, my pity for them, but they're not here, and this is a menswear talk and not a women's wear talk. Yeah. Oh, quality material. The least important of them, but especially for long-term clothing, more significant. The basic rule is that natural fibers, at least for now, tend to beat artificial ones for both longevity and general comfort, and also the ability to clean the damn thing. Some stuff is just hard to clean. Hopefully, with better material science, this will completely change. But until then, you know, we're stuck with it. Okay, so what to wear? This question,
We can't explain all of it.
I can loop back later. Since for those who just joined, I will say the four because I've been repeating them anyway. The four most important things in order are fit, color, proportion, and quality of material. And I use them as live models to demonstrate all but color, which I'll get back to. Okay, so what to wear? Well, who are you? Like, these are really the same kind of question. And yeah, kind of. 'Cause it shapes what you wear in the end, and before that, well, you'll fly and you'll crawl. And, well, maybe you don't know who you are, which, okay, fine. Like, with answering that question in another sense, you can start by copying, because a lot of it is finding, well, the boundaries of things. And here the boundary, in fact, a good definition of a boundary of an object, A. This is using mathematical notation, where that's the symbol for a boundary. A is anything. A and not A. This is by a non-classical logic, which should make sense, because if the object is this circle, well, the boundary of the circle is in A because it's its boundary, but it's also the interface to everything else, which by definition is not A, because it's the boundary. And the relation of this to clothing is figuring out your preferences by, well, even if you have no idea what actually makes something look good, you can look at someone, apparently me in at least some cases, and it's like, okay, this looks good. And that's something you can just sort of know intuitively and sort of magically, which is fine. But also the flip side of that, if you see something and you know that it doesn't look good, there's also like, especially if you don't think about this kind of thing, a huge gray area in which you just don't think about someone's clothes at all. In that case, I would just lump it in here and just not think about it. And by observing more people's clothes of, well, what looks good, what doesn't look good, you develop a better sense of where this boundary is. And this boundary basically defines what your style is. It's what you think looks good. And again, going back to doing it for yourself versus doing it for the rest of the world, there's give and take here. But that give and take is easier to establish when you first figure out, since I said it has to be built bottom up, well, what do you like? And then from there you can start pruning or expanding to, well, what does society like that you also like? But start there. And often if you like something and it looks fine, which most of the time it does, especially with you lot, society will think it looks pretty good too. And there is something real to the phenomena of feeling at ease in your clothes. People can just sort of tell. Or rather, they can tell if you're not at ease is more accurate.
Reminds me, I saw a tweet the other day.
Yeah.
And someone tweeted that they were in a coffee shop and they saw someone walk in with a cowboy hat on, but like they knew that they were like not comfortable with the hat on, and they could tell. Like,
Okay, this is basically what defines the difference between a style and a costume. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so this is a lot of trial and error. So I'll give an approximate set of stages, and these are like roughly like Keegan's stages of development or something like that, meaning that it's not some strictly linear process, but it works well enough for understanding. The first step is, or the 0th step rather, is just ignorance, which is, well, you just don't think about clothes. You wear whatever. Especially in our crowd, plenty of people are like that and will remain like that. But if you're in this talk, I assume that you don't want to be just that. So the next step, which is what I'm advocating for right now, is basically thoughtless imitation, or not exactly thoughtless, but with minimal thought, where it's like, okay, that looks good, imitate it, without actually knowing, well, why does it look good? Or even if it looks good on you, because of course, if something looks good on someone else, that does not mean it looks good on you, not at all necessarily. But hey, gotta walk before you can run. Step after that, another good example of thoughtless imitation is dressing like a rapper. Then there's thoughtful imitation, where you have some concept of the rules or precepts, rather, of dressing and style, which leads to copying things per rules, and is honestly the most annoying stage for those around you, because it leads to a sort of hyper adherence to rules, because it's like cargo culting software. You know how to write software, but you don't really know how to expand it, so you can just sort of stay within a rather narrow niche, and you make do with the best you have for now. But if you keep at it, that stage ends, and then it becomes what I think I wrote Juvenalia on this. You sort of rebel against all rules, where it's wearing something like this jacket, but pants like that, and going all out. That's like not like dressing like a rapper or copying one, but like being the rapper. And then wearing whatever you like, and never moving beyond that. Often that gets a bit dull at some point, because it's just like binging on candy. You get kind of sick of it at some point. And often there's a sort of return to conservatism. Since you had mentioned Twitter, maybe you've seen the Menswear guy on Twitter, Derek something?
Yeah.
Okay. I told you this, but I'd been following that guy off and on since like middle school, so it's been like 15 years now. But I didn't know he had a Twitter, actually, until he suddenly became famous for it, ironically. I saw him on Style Forum many years ago. where you basically deliberately lean towards conservatism, and then the final stage is incorporating these two opposites of standing out, fitting in, and of dressing for yourself and dressing for others. And usually you'll tend to stand out, but in a way that can be somewhat subtle. Not always. This is not subtle. Which I guess is a claim about where I allege myself to be. I had a note about body type, but let's see, what would I say about you guys, for the most part, have about the same body type, which is a roughly average build. So you can wear more or less whatever you want. If you're heavy, don't wear pinstripes. It looks weird, though.
What about long legs? How does that affect?
Dressing in general.
Yeah.
Well, do you mean care about that fact? Do you want to draw attention to it? Deliberately not draw attention to it, or it's whatever?
Well, I guess it really depends on the bagginess of the clothes. Like sometimes a good outfit can be pretty tight, and then it does accentuate it at times. Or I guess it just depends on the fit, doesn't it?
It depends on the fit. Pattern, okay, looping back to color. Pattern matters here, because a good example was, well, pinstripes. If you have vertical stripes, hopefully it's sort of intuitively obvious why they will make your legs look at least not shorter, if not longer. Whereas if you had done horizontal stripes, it will make your legs look shorter. And if you have long legs, then it will look really bizarre, because the shortness of them is being counteracted by the longness of your legs. And if one of them wins too much, there isn't a balance, and it just looks kind of bizarre. It's like saying your average temperature by putting half of yourself in a fire and the other half in a cold plunge. It doesn't average out like that.
That why certain military uniforms have stripes going the length of the leg?
Yeah, like just the one along the side. Yeah, typically. Because that one is sort of evocative of like the length of the bones themselves. And you'll see it in like a tuxedo, where a tuxedo will have often sort of a velvet. The buttons will typically be covered in velvet, the lapel, the linings of, if there was a pocket square, well, pocket here, the top part of it would have it, and then these strips along the top, and then along the leg. Formal wear like that does straddle the line between outfit and costume, but on purpose. I mean, there's a place for costumes.
So can we talk about color? You keep saying we'll come back to it.
Sure. One, it depends a lot on how bold you are, just sort of naturally. And at least at first, I don't recommend trying to force it. Where it's easier to show color in accessories, and also honestly a lot cheaper. Because say we haven't gotten to budget, but that's obviously going to be a consideration. Like if you buy, okay, like a bright red jacket or this thing or whatever, you can't wear that with everything. Whereas if you buy a gray jacket, you can wear it with more or less anything. But then if you have, like in the case of someone wearing a suit, if they have, say, like a bright tie or pocket square or a scarf, actually, my mom made this for me a long time ago. This is like sort of colored, but even here the color is sort of muted. Here, pass it around. Where obviously it's colored. In fact, it's made out of like at least 3 colors, like green, I think blue, and purple, individually, which are actually fairly strong colors, but the combination of them mutes the whole thing out somewhat and makes it, well, more palatable. And because it's like more than 10 years old, the knots are all fucked. But, you know, my mom made it, so I'm not about to throw it away. This is also why, especially since none of you guys wear suits, the easiest way to show color and to get used to it and enjoy it is in socks. It's like all y'all are wearing socks, and will probably continue to do so. And buying colored socks is cheap. Very important. So you can go to Uniqlo or whatever, or buy a pack of 10 or more.
I don't understand how socks are mostly covered by shoes. There's like a little sliver of them. How could that add anything to like? I know small things matter, but like,
Okay, let's get to why small things matter, because this is a point here of doing it bottom up versus top down. Doing it bottom up has a genuine advantage over doing it top down, basically because if you're detail oriented, well, you care about the little things. And if you care about the little things, you can care about the big things. But very rarely do people who only care about the big things care about the little things because they're the little things. They're little. By definition, they don't matter that much. Whereas the sort of obsessiveness and doing it the other way around translates to caring at every level. And seems to be a sort of general principle, which is why a bunch of CEOs seem to be detail obsessed in a way that's really micromanaging and annoying for those who have to go under. Okay.
I'm just looking for Robert.
I guess his drip was too good to be here.
The other fun thing about like flashy socks is that you're right. If you're wearing shoes, they're often barely noticeable. But sometimes you'll see, flash of red or something.
Yeah, this is a point.
It catches the eye. And if you're visiting a house or a place like this, you take your shoes off. Then suddenly it's like a talking point when you've got Spider-Man socks on, but you're otherwise wearing, I don't know, slightly more formal wear than I'm wearing. I have a friend who has nothing but like super dope socks, and I remember it sticks out.
Yeah, it's because okay, like take your outfit, because all of the colors you're wearing are like basically base colors, and but if your socks are swapped out with like red, not red because all red would not go well with olive green. Let's say like dark purple. That's a good example actually.
okay.
And then someone notices that basically because their expectations are calibrated one way, this tends to really adjust them more than if you had just worn a purple jacket or something.
Okay, I can understand that.
This is also why shoes matter a lot, despite what the Shawshank Redemption says, that no one looks at them. That's not true. That's not true at all. Shoes are also my personal favorite article of clothing, so I'm going to defend them.
Can I offer an anecdote?
Yeah, sure.
It's not quite these shoes. I have a similar pair, but they're like more patch colored, or like more patch style.
Yeah, bring them up. Let's
Oh, yeah.
to all of our attention.
Fun, bright, even colored soles, which I didn't notice until like a month after I got it.
Yeah, that's a good example.
But-
Actually, that's like colored soles are a very good example of random color, because like even tonight, if we're just like sitting by the fireplace and no one's paying any particular attention to your outfit, but then they see the sole, that's a good way of drawing attention. That also, unlike say wearing a bright red jacket, which since I have a bright red jacket, I would know something like that is screaming, "Look at me," whether or not you intended to.
The other shoes I have are slightly less like brightly colored, but they're still colorful. I received more compliments on those shoes than I have on everything else in my entire life put together. I've been stopped in
Yeah,
men's
there's power
restrooms.
laws on outfits. Yeah, I've been stopped for my red jacket. Definitely power laws on clothing. It's kind of surprising what sometimes will just draw everyone's eye.
I don't think the red jacket is that surprising though.
I've never seen
Still,
a
over
red jacket.
1,000 people in like a year and a half is a lot.
Did you like
But
have a clicker with you to track that?
In my head, like a rough count.
2 or 3 times a day. I mean, that makes sense. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Like I would go to a party and sometimes like 30 or 40 people, and there are parties where I did count actually, and so 30 or 40 is not just a number I made up.
Mhm.
And then yeah, if I wore it like reliably like once a day, it's not like I wore it anything close to every day of the year. So more than one time, people have crossed the street just to tell me that.
Wow.
One guy fucking ran across the street, Jay running, which was something.
What can you say about originality and the half-life of a trend, and like how those two influence each other?
For trends in men's clothing, because men's clothing has cycles as well, but it's slower than the period of it is slower than with women's clothing, which seems to have too many cycles, honestly. In my case, I will just, only if a trend has been running for a while and I've noticed some people have had it, I will tend to look at it. Then I'll decide personally about, do I care? I have never personally cared about whether what I'm wearing is in trend or not. That's why I use the word style consistently instead of fashion throughout the talk, because I think that's a better focus, both for your self-esteem and for your wallet. And the amount of variations in clothing is actually surprisingly finite, unless you start designing your own clothes, which puts you like far beyond this anyway. Like, ultimately, clothes still boil down to, well, they have to cover your body, and your body has only so many parts. You got your arms, your torso, your legs, and your feet. Then your hands and face. Which means that the categories of like hat, glasses, scarf, or tie or something, some sort of shirt-like thing, because I've yet to see people wear just something like arms. There's armbands, but those are not nearly as common, because they're just not as functional. Jacket, pants, socks, or a onesie. That covers like the vast majority of clothing, just by like super category, and even with like futuristic material is not likely to change that much.
I do see in like women's clothing recently they have like these like crop tops, but like with sleeves, so there's no like it's exposed shoulders, but like the arms are covered, and it's like one piece is like connected under the armpit.
Yeah, this is an aspect where men and women's clothing tends to differ fundamentally. Even if you have a six-pack, wearing a crop top will look bizarre and not in a good way. Like, you're welcome to try if you have the boldness, but I can't help you with that one.
You might work at a gay club.
Maybe taking your shirt off would help too.
Yeah.
Also, that's free.
Yeah.
And that's hard to beat that price.
I do take my shirt off a lot more often than I wear crop tops.
You don't say. Where did I put my phone? If I don't find it in like 3 seconds, I'll just go without it. But oh, here it is. Alright. For color, once you do get more into it, the big thing is like matching opposites. Here I'm just going to rattle off color combinations that work, because this is something that's better understood just by training examples. If you want, look at a color wheel and take opposites or things that are close on it. Stuff that's sort of at like right angles to each other on a color wheel tend to look rather poor. Like, for example, olive green and red basically never look good together. But olive green and black actually is a surprisingly good combination. Khaki and black as well, which is not intuitive, but is true.
I thought green and red was supposed to look good.
But I said olive green, which is not the same.
Okay.
Like forest green, or sort of like greeny green that's on the darker side, which tends to have more blue in it, does look better with red. But that's because it's fundamentally a different color. Like, I think you recognize that like the 3 or 4 color categories of like red, blue, green, or yellow are just as words, not enough to really encompass the continuum of colors.
Okay.
Like, there's an essential continuity to them, so they capture something of it, but that's just like not enough to really capture it in a way that's useful for dressing. You need a bit more than that. Maybe splitting the color wheel up into, or the spectrum up into like, say, 8 or 10 categories, that is useful. That's enough to get by. You don't need to split into every shade of white, eggshell, china, bone, etc. That's too granular by continuity also. And for color, it's easier to have like a single large piece that sort of anchors it, and then things around it. Color, you should think of it like you're trying to do nuclear fusion, where it's possible, but it's fundamentally unstable. So making an outfit that's supposed to not look completely like a costume out of just very brightly colored pieces. Actually, wait, Ari, come back for like 5 seconds. I need you for one last demo.
Yeah, okay.
Since this is a perfect example, this cape. Like here, if he didn't have the cape, he's basically not wearing color at all. In fact, almost by definition, he's wearing black. But if he had the cape, And if he had a brightly colored shirt that's like yellow, that already is like putting it into costume territory. Even, I mean, the fact that it's a cape always runs a risk, but you already know that. But even if it wasn't a cape and it was a jacket or something, and his shirt was say bright yellow, that's like verging on costume. And if the pants were, I don't know, let's say like blue or something, like a, not just like a jean blue, but like a distinctive blue that's not just navy or something very dark, then it can work and it can work. But those are outfits that are basically designed to get people's attention, and they're like snapshots. You can only really pull them off once. Like the picture of a guy falling from 9/11. If you saw 100 pictures like that, you wouldn't care. But that one everyone thinks about, which is why it's got the Pulitzer. And outfits are like that too. And that's what I mean by their the color is sort of unstable in this sense, in a way that the other attributes are not, which is also why I held off until the end to get into it.
The other cool thing about purple as a choice for the cape is like it signals fun, right? If you had chosen black like the rest of the outfit, people would be like, okay, he's going for the Nazgul vibe. I'm not sure if he's approachable, if he wants us to stay away. So.
Yeah. Intermediate colors like purple, forest, or not all, forest green, sort of like mustardy yellow, and burnt orange, which like literally are like about halfway on the color wheel, are a good way of having possibly large swaths of color without looking like a clown. Whereas if you did like bright red, bright blue, bright yellow, that almost inevitably will look costume-ish. But if you have one thing like that, say you have a pea coat that's bright yellow, that can look very nice. Like the movie The Substance, if you look it up, The Substance pea coat, you'll see what I mean. The main character has a bright yellow pea coat that really well stands out, and in a good way.
I would only look at that part. That movie was heavy on the body horror.
But do you remember the pea coat?
I actually don't. I
guess it didn't stand out that much.
Well, it was just blocked out by the rest of that's like
yeah,
body
maybe.
horror is the one thing that really gets to me. It got
okay.
me. Great movie, powerful message. Wish I never saw it.
Okay. Last 2 points. The actual purchasing part. Well, what/where to buy. Well, I guess I did the what, so it's more the where and the how. For fitting, there's basically 3 levels of fit to clothing that you can purchase. There's off the rack, which is the default. You literally pull it off of a rack. This is by far the default one, and for stuff like socks and accessories especially is the best choice. Like getting socks that are made to fit you is mostly just over optimization. Like it is, I mean, by definition it's a better fit, but it's such a trivial better fit for a cost that can easily be like 10 times or more. On the opposite end is bespoke. In fact, even the word bespoke means to be spoken for, because you have a bolt of fabric that has no shape pre-assumed. Like you essentially negotiate with the tailor what it should become, and that's limited only by your creativity and their willingness, which is why it's expensive. And by the way, if you see a suit that's like 3 or 5K and you think that's pricey, keep in mind it's more than 100 hours of labor for the tailor, and more than half of the cost of that is for the raw material. So at the end of it, they're making like less than minimum wage often. Don't be a tailor. It's a terrible job. It also requires usually a lifetime of apprenticeship, and many of them have been tailors since they were like 15 or younger, back when it was legal to do that. Or they were desperate enough to not care about the law. And now they're like 80. I suspect tailoring will die off completely for a bit, and then if we all make it, the machines will allow it to have a resurgence as custom clothing becomes much more economical. In between these two, which especially for shirts, like long sleeves especially, but even for a t-shirt if you can find it, is made to measure, where, well, you're measured fairly carefully, and each piece of the fabric along the stitch lines is prefabbed, but they're assembled to fit you. This is the Pareto frontier of this kind of thing, and a specific tip for dress shirts especially, never get them not made to measure at least. If you've got the money and you want to, you can go for bespoke, which will be a few hundred, but made to measure is the same cost as the store and fits dramatically better. You can get stuff tailored, and the basic rule is you can always make it shorter, you can't make it longer, because, you know, conservation of mass. Oh yeah, thrift stores are a good one, especially for the more formal style that I've tended towards. But there's lots of stuff in thrift stores. and now it's become something of a hobby. Don't expect to save that much money though. Thrift stores have sort of morphed from something for the poor into a hobby for the upper middle class and the poor. Well, not a hobby for them, but
But this made-to-measure thing is what you're suggesting.
yeah.
And where do you get measurements for this?
You can have a tape measure and then you can literally have someone measure you. More sophisticated ways these days would be like get 3D scanned. That's more for this crowd that I normally wouldn't give that advice because it would be too complicated for people. But here I think it might actually be feasible. That one will of course give you a very accurate measurement. But you can often go to an alterations tailor. There's one like over that way, for example, and just ask them to measure you. Often they won't even charge you. And if they do it some trivial amount, and then just write down the measurements. Like, you're grown now, so you're basically the only measurements that tend to fluctuate are ones that depend on weight.
That's a category that I do worry about because my weight has fluctuated historically. So that would be
Yeah,
one
that's
of
a real
my big
problem.
concerns.
Yeah, that's a real issue. Like I'm not gonna lie to you, it just is. Like if your weight, like
if you want to look fitted, you're gonna have to have basically two wardrobes.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is also why clothes fitting is a costly signal, both in the signaling theory sense and literally, which I guess is why it's from the signaling theory sense, because it's going to be costly in that sense. It doesn't have to like break your bank, and people here tend to have like some kind of software job or something, so they're not usually broke, certainly compared to the baseline population. But for example, let's say like buying a base of clothes as per the exposition I've given would probably come out for like a full wardrobe for a couple of K. And then if you like go crazier, maybe 5K. That's if you like buy like a really nice suit or something. It's not going to be distributed uniformly. Yeah.
I just want to note, if you happen to be traveling to poorer parts of the world anyway, that may be a good opportunity to get some tailoring done.
Yeah. I've had all my stuff that's bespoke made, typically in India. It's not as cheap as you might think either, though. Don't expect to get it for like a tenth of a cost. That's not how it works. Like the base material is like a real cost, and that cannot be driven down beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
Like the only thing you really save on is the cost of labor, which is big, but it's only like half the cost. So even in like let's say, like in Vietnam, I had a nice suit made for about $1,000, a full 3-piece as well. Also, if you do end up getting a suit specifically made, if you care about that style, I recommend get them to do a 3-piece and do a vest, and ask for a peak lapel. Like that lapel style he has is the more common style. In fact, this is standard. Peak lapels are what you'll see on tuxedos. Sometimes they're like pointy. They just look better, I think.
Yeah.
There's also the shawl collar style, but save that for when you like deepen this.
Yeah, I mean, I do own some old suits from when I was a lawyer like a decade ago. They're not 3-piece, there's no vest. And yeah, I guess definitely does not feel like the style I want to project now.
Good, then that's over here.
Yeah. Okay, but so what is your general reaction to my current level of style or dress or whatever? What screams out as good? What screams out as needing improvement?
Let's see your socks.
They don't even match.
I don't care. They don't have to match. I mean, I have the same pair of socks and they are comfy. Those are fine, I think. Actually, since I've been illustrating that olive green and black work well together, yours is actually a very good example of this because your entire top half is black.
Except for the red and white message.
Do not virtue signal. I'm usually not someone who gets logos on my shirt, but that one's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I think yours is pretty good, actually.
Okay. Cool.
Like, is there a particular way you see yourself? Because that, like, whether it looks good depends heavily on your self-conception.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had said, you were a lawyer way back when, and that apparently is not your self-conception. It's also not your job, it seems, in a literal sense anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's still something I find interesting to talk about sometimes, but that's the extent of it. It is not my job. It is not a world I'm trying to participate in.
Maybe long sleeve shirts, not with a collar, just like longer sleeve.
Oh, yeah.
Also a nice way to get the benefits of like a shirt and a jacket. This is the kind of advice that I'm usually more hesitant about because it's so outfit dependent, which is why I've tried to give some combination of like random specific rules and then some precepts, because mixing them is very messy. Sort of like with cooking.
Yeah.
Like there is an precept to it, but finding it is not linear. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Sure would be nice though.
Yeah.
Like in your case, not white socks, darker jeans, your shirt's fine. It's also the Iliad one, which thankfully had good taste when he designed it. And get the sleeves of your jacket short. Actually, wait, here, show me your arm sleeves. That's a good one to start. I think the sleeves, I mean, you don't have to take it off.
Okay, so yeah. So
I think those are a little too, like, those are too long.
Yeah, yeah.
That
And the
one.
jacket's kind
And
of
you can
wearing
get
out.
shirts
and
that
you
go
need
past the
replacement
bone
anyway.
hair, right?
Yeah, I can tell that just because he has to, like, kind of shuck his arms like it's an oyster to move and to fully use his range of motion.
My,
Really?
I didn't interrupt. I'm sorry. I was gonna ask because my feeling is that these
Yours are too short.
Well, but it like not at most angles. It's kind of just like if I do the full both arms out, it's just
Yeah,
at
okay.
the shoulder.
Like, what's the material of that one? Is it sort of like springy, kind of?
A bit. I have to check, but there's some flex to it.
Yours is probably fine then. For stuff that's like slightly stretchy, it's better that it's like a tiny bit long because you want it so that in like most of the positions you will be assuming that it's approximately the right length. I wouldn't try judging it by the extremes unless you tend to assume those poses a lot for whatever reason.
Right.
Like a good one's like literally like just take a pen and paper and just like write something and then see the position when you're writing or when you're typing, because realistically you're going to be doing a lot of that. Dancing is another good way to see the reasonably large part of the range of motion. That one's a stress test.
Yeah.
Oh, and for shoes, specific one which I feel strongly about, don't get shoes that are like squared off. It makes you look like you had your toes cut off.
What do you mean squared off?
Just look up square-toed dress shoe and you'll see what I mean very quickly. Like, I'll just use my shoe as an example because they're right there. These are not squared off. I mean, literally they're not. You
Oh,
can
I see.
see it. Where squared off would be like,
Yeah.
those look fucking awful. They
Yeah.
look like your toes have been cut off or even flip bound. Which is another beauty trend I've never understood.
Foot binding?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, even leaving aside the ethics of it, just the appeal of it, I don't get.
I think it's a BDSM thing.
If you say so, man.
I also share your lack of aesthetic interest in foot binding, as well as your lack of ethical impressment.
Sure, it's unethical and all that too. But it's also ugly, which makes it doubly unforgivable.
Yes.
Did I have anything else? I think that's it, though.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Oh, that is it, actually, and just on time. It's 59.
I've got two lightning round questions.
Yeah?
When he came downstairs and said there's this awesome dressed guy upstairs giving a talk, I knew it was you. That's why your jacket was there. And
Thanks.
does your outfit work without the jacket? Like, oh man, sure fucking does. So I just, all I could see was the turtleneck, right? Or the
Yeah.
semi-turtleneck?
It's
I
a
can't-
turtleneck.
Yeah. And no, I definitely vibes.
Yeah.
I think there are some where it's I was gonna make a deep cut reference, but it wouldn't
How do you know that it wouldn't?
Anyone very familiar with the TV show Scrubs?
Only a little.
There was an episode where he's got this three-piece outfit and it like looks great all together, but then it is like a crop top for like the bottom. Like, it's supposed to be bunny for
I
the
see.
bottom layer. And
I
he's
might
like,
have seen a
"Oh."
YouTube clip of this, actually.
Yeah, it would come up if you looked up like
Yeah.
whatever Scrubs fashion something. But yeah, I think some things come together like as ensembles. I think that's just a black shirt.
Oh, actually, last not obvious tip. A specific order to dress yourself that makes it easier to layer your clothes, such as that subsets of them will look good. Because, you're going to take your jacket off at some point, hopefully. Start with your pants, then socks. Because, there's like It's just like deciding what to cook. There's an infinity of things in front of you. And if it's totally unconstrained, it's just very difficult to pick something. And some people's solution to this, like jobs, is to just own only one outfit, like the jeans and the turtleneck, famously. And that's a solution. I think Obama too always had like the same tie. But I'm not going to advocate for it, obviously. Like that is a costume, and that's essentially turning your life into a costume, which
Yeah, if you're a politician, I think that's kind of a gig, huh? But
yeah, or jobs.
yeah.
But I just find that a little dystopian personally. But if you fix your pants, it tends to, because they take up a large part of your body, I mean half of it, they immediately constrain what, say, your shirt can be and your socks can be. And especially once you fix your socks and their color, especially if they're supposed to be colored, then it's much easier to pick shirt and then jacket, and everything tends to fall together more easily. It doesn't work the other way if you just try to fix your shirt first. It also just looks bizarre to be naked wearing only a shirt with your dick hanging out. For dudes, it's just not aesthetic.
Just Winnie the Poohing it. Yeah.
Like if you're gonna be half naked, you want your bottom half to be the covered one to start. If you're only gonna be half naked. If you're gonna be fully naked, well then it kind of dictates itself.
Then fashion advice is kind of beside the point.
Well, hairstyle. Manscaping even.
You could like toss your hair back suggestively. All right.